So, before we begin, I just want to make a quick note that this episode is going to get really heavy since I will be talking about my struggles with depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideation. And I'm going to be fairly blunt. So, it's best to get yourself ready. If you need to pause and come back to it when you're ready, or if you'd rather turn to something else, I think it'll be wise. I'm guessing you know yourself better than I do. So, um, just giving you fair warning. Okay, now on to the show. I'm not sure when it all began. All I know is that I first considered suicide in junior high and that I thought about it fairly often all throughout high school. It's hard to pinpoint exactly why. At the time, I remember my feelings fluctuated a lot. Had a lot of mood swings, but you know, feelings of depression and to anger, being back to being depressed and anxious and happy and excited, back to being angry and the depressed. I think my aunt has a bipolar. I think that's what she was officially diagnosed with, although I don't know what the diagnosis is now for her. But I wondered if that's what it was like, just going through so many different feelings that fluctuated day to day. Well, why did my feelings fluctuate like this? I think much of it probably at the time depended on the situation. Um, Being broke all the time definitely contributed to feeling anxious about the future, but that was just a default. I don't know why I felt anxious about it at some times. Maybe it got overwhelming and then I just shut down at some point. It's hard to remember from so far in the past. Um, but I do know that I wasn't anxious all the time. Seeing others not as broke as me led to feelings of anger, a sense of injustice. But again, like those feelings would come and go. It wasn't like I was thinking about or feeling that way all the time. So, I wondered if a lot of the feelings fluctuating was just that there were just a lot of things under the surface that was bubbling up, and I don't know why some things just popped off at certain times. My parents couldn't seem to find a way to succeed, to do something to stay above water financially, which also left me feeling helpless a lot. All of these contributed to an overall sense of hopelessness, like life was just hard. And being alive, going through the day by day was just hard. Making ends meet was hard. Just completing your daily tasks was hard. And then carrying all these emotions alone, well, with no one else to talk to, that was especially hard. I think it also didn't help that I felt responsible for my parents in a lot of ways, as if they were my children. I think I lost respect for them fairly early in my life, probably late elementary school is when it started, but I think in junior high, I just full on didn't respect them at all. I remember one time I forget exactly how old I was, but at one point I ended up like smacking my own father in the face. That was one hell of a moment. I also remember flipping the bird off to my mom. All kinds of nasty behavior. But it was honestly a reflection of the fact that I just didn't respect them as human beings, as parents. Not just because they struggled to put food on the table, but because I couldn't trust their decision making on anything. From how they trusted the wrong people and they would get swindled, to cultural norms, which they were fairly wrong about a lot since they were immigrants and they were still living, I think, in their heads in another country in a completely different context. Um, and I also didn't just trust their judgment on, I don't know, just about everything, right? I also felt responsible for their feelings, which is kind of weird. In my mind, I think like things like I can't ask them for anything for my birthday, like no gifts, because the things I really wanted, I know they can't afford. So they won't be able to get it for me, first of all. And then all I would get is a barrage of guilty feelings on their end. And then now I'd feel terrible for making them feel guilty. Right. So these are all things that, I mean, I don't know how much of this would have been was true. Like if this is exactly what would have, how it would have played out. But I think there was a lot of experiences in the day to day that gave me this belief. And I really, held on to it. It was kind of like a pretty common narrative in my own head. of how things would play out with them, right? Like they meant the best, but they were just unable, they were lacking in some ways. And so, all I would do is I was just going to cause them emotional harm. I also didn't realize it until later on, um, that they also lacked emotional intelligence. So I learned early that turning to them made me feel worse a lot of times. Much of their responses to my expressions of any feeling was that it'll pass, or it's just a phase, it's all temporary, or that it's hard, but that there's nothing you can do about it. So learn to deal with it. They taught me to just try to overcome or to ignore it. I think a lot of the things that they saw me, like just genuine expressions of feelings and trying to explain why I felt that way, I think we'd be met with, their reaction. Um, like they themselves just didn't know how to deal with my feeling these ways. And so a lot of the times their explanations were just fairly, I'm guessing pretty cookie cutter for a lot of parents to say, like, oh, I know it feels that way right now. I know things are hard, but it'll be better, or things like that. It's all I got. I ended up using a lot of these coping mechanisms that, of course, these strategies just only mask what's happening underneath, I think. And whatever I was feeling, it didn't go away. It was there. I just learned not to deal with it. That's really what the lesson I took from. I'm not trying to rip on my parents. I just want to paint the full picture. Like, imagine a kid feeling everything he's feeling and feeling them intensely. I don't know if it was particular to me, but I did feel a lot of these feelings fairly intensely. Not having anywhere to just put those feelings, right? Like, anytime I expressed it physically or through words, through yelling, through crying, like, those were things that, you know, there just there was no real reaction to, right? It was just like, he's sad, but he'll get over it, right? Like, that was the kind of response. And I didn't really have friends to turn to. No parents, um, no adults of any kind to try that I could trust. So I was just left sitting with all these feelings alone. And that's really the point, is that I was left with these feelings alone. And it's overwhelming. And that's what made suicide so appealing at that time. Life was just overwhelming. Fuck, like, having been through it, I imagine that for most people, suicide isn't something to glorify or praise. It's not something to seek out. If you've been through it, like if you've been there in that place where you're even considering it, it's really a last resort. It's the option you turn to when the alternative, which is honestly just simply living, when that option just felt too hard. I'm not talking about like, making ends meet or just completing daily tasks. Like, those felt overwhelming when you're already in this place. For me, by living, I just meant being awake. Like, that was hard. Like, being conscious, right? Being aware of the world, having thoughts and feelings, experiencing life in any way. All of that felt just overwhelming. Um, that became too painful. And when all that becomes so painful, you just want everything to stop. You just want it to stop. And that's what it was. I was yearning. I was wanting peace. I was wanting silence. I was wanting an end. I just wanted things to end. I didn't know what it was on the other side of it. I just wanted everything to stop. I just wanted life to stop. And these thoughts would just start taking a life of its own, right? Um, Thoughts about how to make it happen, strategizing about how to do it, but also planning for the aftermath of it all, right? Like I said, often felt responsible for my parents' feelings. Um, and I thought maybe the best way for everyone to deal with my death would have been for it to look like an accident. So I even had these thoughts of how could I make it look like it was an accident, like, you know, make it not so obvious that I was trying to get hit by a car or fall off a cliff or, you know. Um, I spent many nights considering the possibilities, and sometimes I did it like how, I mean, we lived out in the desert. It gets cold out at night. We're talking freezing cold. And there were nights when I remember I would just get up out of the house 1, 2 in the morning when everyone was asleep. And it's freezing cold outside, and I would just lay at the park bench right outside in our apartment complex in the middle of the night and just lay there. And I would just hope that I would fall asleep, and in my sleep I would just freeze to death. That I didn't have to do anything. I would just fall asleep, and that would just be the end. I had a lot of recurring dreams where I would fall from a building, and it felt liberating, to be honest, in those dreams. Or dreams of getting into some head-on collision or get in a fire accident of some kind. House is burning down and it collapses on me. Um, those honestly wouldn't have been bad ways to go. I mean, I sometimes wanted the physical pain, to be honest, because it at least drowned out whatever other kind of pain I was feeling inside. But I also, had this weird thing about sharp objects and fires, right? So I had a lot of thoughts in those directions about what I might do to myself. Um, Something quick, maybe in a quiet, isolated place, someplace peaceful, someplace where I could just slowly just end it. And then at some point, my body would give out. I'd fall asleep and I'd wake up the next day and I'd find a way to manage to carry on. The thoughts never went away. It was always there. The only difference was the degree of willingness to follow through on them. And the theme was always the same. When life felt overwhelming, I turned to those thoughts for, I'm not sure what, for comfort, for hope. And what's crazy is that it just wasn't always like that, right? So for a while, I felt like I had things under control. And this is especially true when I went off to college. Um, I went through ups and downs. Like it wasn't like life was beautiful and perfect, but I don't know what about college it was. Maybe it was just the fact that I was away from home, and or that I got to get a nice restart on my life. At least that's what I told myself. Could just ignore my past and then start anew. Whether it was just physically being in a place with better weather, um, physically just being in a different place and having lots of distractions. I mean, if you live in the residence halls, there's always something going on, right? So it's not that I had emotional support necessarily, but there was always something there to distract me. There was always something going on, so that I didn't have to deal with my own head, with my own thoughts, my own feelings. And graduate school was more the same. I got to be away from home. I got to be on my own, and luckily, I was able to receive decent financial support throughout my graduate school education. So money wasn't a huge like stressor. I was also able to teach SATs at that point over the summers and make some money that way. So financially, I was fine. I had a lot of people around me, a lot of events, a lot of things that could distract me, and I just needed to focus on school and just, it was just like take it one step at a time, right? Just finish one program and then get on to the next, right? So maybe that singular focus helped me to not have to worry about anything else. And so life felt manageable. It felt easy in some ways. But then I got married and life suddenly got overwhelming again. And it wasn't marriage. It wasn't really the marriage. It was honestly the timing of it all. Like, I don't know what the hell I was thinking, right? But in a 6 month span, um, I got married, which was already stressful for if you ever had to plan for a wedding. It causes a lot of like stress and arguing and, ooh, man, really tough just planning for the wedding. Um, I applied for and landed a job at Villanova, which was great. But they required that I finish my PhD by the time I started the job. So now I'm stressed out, like trying to finish my PhD, which, my God, like I went through revision after revision and none of it felt like it was going to get me to the end. Like that was painfully stressful. And then I moved across country where I knew no one. And it was different this time because I had someone with me. And so we're planning a move together. And if you know anything about me, like planning things with other people is not necessarily my forte. I do it sometimes if I need to, but I don't really enjoy doing it, and it's particularly stressful for me. Um, so juggling all this at once, right? Saying that it was a lot is really an understatement. I was super overwhelmed. I mean, every day there was a long to-do list before we moved, during the move, after the move. There's just a lot of things that I was trying to juggle and prepare for, and it just never felt like there was enough time in the day. Every day was just a struggle to just enjoy a moment. Every day was also another change in routine, something different that I had to do. I remember, like, before we even left for Philly, I was already having these suicidal ideations again. I remember the first, um, you know, right after the wedding, it was already pretty stressful learning how to be in that kind of a relationship. And then with all this other stuff piled up on, I remember there was a moment when I just was playing with a knife in the dark room. Like we're planning the move and we're trying to figure out how to box things up and we're, doing all these things to prepare. And I had a night where I just like laid in that room with all these boxes and stuff that was slowly being packed up, like just with a knife because I just felt so overwhelmed. I mean, luckily I didn't do anything. I fell asleep, woke up in the morning with this thing next to me. I mean, geez, like when I say that things can turn really fast for me, it can turn really fast. It doesn't take much. I just need to get past a certain point and then it's a real life possibility. Um, And it didn't seem like anything I did was enough to make me feel like I was back on solid ground. Because, now I was juggling several different things that, you know, had a lot of meaning to me. And so as a result, like, I just constantly felt like I was failing at everything, right? When I when I focus on work, and I still had to focus on work, not just because of the new job. If it was just teaching in the position and fulfilling the requirements of the job, that wouldn't have been so stressful. But, it wasn't a permanent position, it was a teaching fellowship. And so I was still applying for more permanent position, a tenure track job, which meant I was trying to do research and publish and do X, Y, and Z. And so, I would spend a lot of energy on work because I would be so anxious about work. And then when I did so, my marriage would suffer. But then when I focused on my marriage, I felt like my work suffered. When I focused on settling in and finding a community in Philly, my introvert self would be exhausted. And I just never felt like I was in an okay place, right? No matter what I did, I just felt like I was dropping the ball on something, whether it's for other people or for myself. I was filled with anxiety every day, just looking at the responsibility lists, just hoping for them to just magically disappear. But they didn't because they don't, right? I just wanted them to disappear. But they're there when you wake up in the morning. And, the way I coped at the time when it became overwhelming was like, better to just drink and numb myself rather than to just end it all. Because now I had people that I was responsible for, I felt like. And so as a result, you know, I thought that maybe this would be better than just ending it all. So the nights would be filled with just drinking just to numb myself, just enough so that I could go to sleep. Then I would wake up in the morning and I would just go through the checklist, the things that I got to do, like a mindless zombie. I dreaded going to work, even though teaching was and is a passion of mine. I dreaded going to work. I dreaded going home because I felt like I was terrible at, relationships. I dreaded life. I was just falling apart left and right. I probably wouldn't have even taken any steps to seek help, to be honest. It's hard, kind of, if you're still functioning when you're depressed, right? It's easy to be in denial that you have a serious problem. If you could still wake up, like, I study psychology, so in my mind, I'm thinking like, well, I'm not like, just laying in bed, sleeping all day, and I'm still showering daily, and I'm still doing X, Y, and Z. So I'm fine. I still have some, you know, still feel like I have some control. Uh, and so it actually was the biggest barrier probably was a mental barrier to just acknowledge that I could at least use some help. But of course, finding a therapist is really hard. Finding that kind of help is just really difficult. To my surprise at the time, right? It was so hard. Like, juggling what would and wouldn't be covered by insurance, finding a therapist that was actually available, that was surprisingly hard. It's just such a shortage of mental health professionals. And on top of that, already being depressed. And so I was already lacking motivation. And as I said, like, if you're in denial to some degree, like, you're not going to act on, trying to get help because it doesn't make sense to if you're actually okay and you can handle it. Um, I think it helped to have a partner who at least had information about what to look for, what to ask, followed up with me on how things might have gone if I was trying out a therapist and figuring out whether or not it was a good fit. I mean, she was really helpful for all of that. Um, and once I found a therapist I was happy with, I was at least able to let myself feel something real, right? To cry, to hurt. There's a lot of things that I told you, like, I learned to cope with things by just repressing everything in many ways or distracting myself until I started feeling a little bit better. And it worked for me for a while. It helped me get through life. So thought it was fine, but it just didn't work anymore, right? So, this was a space for me to actually feel something real. And it was obvious I had a lot that was still pent up, that it was there, that never just went away. Because just in talking about my history, my experiences, there would be days I would come home and after a session, and I would just put the blanket over my head and I would just cry until I fell asleep. I didn't want anyone around me. I didn't, you know, it was a good kind of crying. It was a releasing in a way of all that I just was holding on to. And so I did feel to some degree lighter each time that happened. But in the moment, I remember it took hours for me to even be functional after some of these sessions. And it took a while, but things did improve. In the least, I became more aware of how sad or angry I've been in my marriage and life in general. Um, I also started to see the ways my own anxieties fed this unhealthy approach to work, this obsession with feeling like I need to do more that was taking me away from the other things in my life that mattered. I began to slowly find myself on at least more solid ground, at least more than I had been since the move to Philly. But the truth was that though I improved some, there was, in retrospect, so much work left to be done. It was just kind of scratching the surface, right? And the signs were there. The signs were there because, like I said, this way of reacting to situations, the way of coping, was something that I had developed over decades at that point, right? So when I had a bad fight with my partner, I would spiral. I mean, it happened less often than before, and my responses shifted noticeably, but there were still there were still days and there were still weeks even when I would just spiral. Um, it happened less, but it didn't go away, and that's really the theme here. Like, things just happen less, just not never necessarily. When I had anything that could be construed as a negative feedback at work, man, I would have this sudden rush of anxiety that just kept me up some nights. Like, I would just be a workaholic, like, just Not necessarily pull all-nighters, but I would lose sleep because I was trying to alleviate those feelings of anxiety by doing something about it. Um, I became like obsessed with just getting things done and help alleviate something. But a lot of it was probably the anxiety I was feeling. But still, I was able to manage, and which was better than before. And I found comfort and consistency um, in life. We built a decent community in Philly, and I was at least hopeful for something better as we were moving forward. Right, we are pretty excited, and I found out, and I was super excited that I was about to have my first kid. So, like I said, a lot of things to be kind of hopeful for. Then again, life became overwhelming. When I didn't expect it, it came fairly late in spring. It was actually right around graduation time at Villanova, and I was called for an interview at Pasadena City College. And I even flew out there for the interview, even though I think they offered to do it virtually. Uh, and then, lo and behold, I landed the job and I had to move back to California right when I was about to have my first kid. And so now I'm moving across the country again, starting a new job again, and becoming a father for the first time while dealing with all that kind of responsibilities and so on, that and emotional baggage that comes with it. Um, but plus on top of that, this was a tenure track position. So for me, there was a lot at stake. Like I really did not want to fuck this up. Like this is a once in a lifetime opportunity. So uh, you know, uh, it, it was like I'm trying to kind of explain that it wasn't just like a lot of to do stuff. There was a lot of emotions here, right? Like what the job meant to me, what moving back to California actually meant to me emotionally. Like there's just a lot there. Being closer to family was actually one of the negatives. There's something nice about being far away from family. I mean, you've probably noticed that from the theme here of my years in college and graduate school, that just being away from home was often helpful just so that I had one less emotional burden at least. Um, and if all that wasn't enough, like I start the job, my daughter is born like just really, really within like a couple months of starting the job, and then she is hospitalized at 2 weeks old. It was an infection, a staph infection that they couldn't figure out exactly where it was rooted. Eventually, we found out it was in her bone in her leg, and so she had to go into surgery. We were in the hospital, basically living in the hospital for a good 2 weeks. Um, I was still commuting to work. At this time, there wasn't any online classes I was teaching. All of this was in person. So, you know, I, I just started. I didn't have paternity leave. I had to physically go into work, and because I just started, there was only a few days of personal time off I could take. Um, I tried to schedule it so that I could be away from work as much as possible, but the reality was I still had to go in for work. Um, and It was I remember a lot of late nights. You have late nights just because a kid, an infant, wakes up every couple of hours, but it was also, man, those nights when under a lamp, 2, 3 in the morning, just grading papers as quickly as I can, just to at least do what I can to complete the basic duty. Like I said, it was a tenure track job. I didn't want to screw up that opportunity. None of these are excuses, by the way, for how I handle things. If anything, these events simply expose what I think was still underneath. That there wasn't a good foundation for how I dealt with my depression and anxiety, at least not a healthy way of dealing with it. Because there was a tendency that, like I said, the foundation was a tendency that was laid through over a couple of decades at that point, like 2, 3 decades, and um, I did just more of the same, right? I go into default mode. That's what I do when things get this hard. I focus on just making it through the day. I was in survival mode. Just get what you can done as much as possible. You can wait till tomorrow to feel anything, right? Like when all this is done, that's when you can let yourself reflect and feel. But in the meantime, you just got to get it done. Um, and right now, you just need to focus on duties, work, logistics. That's the focus. And, when my mind is there, you could imagine what that meant for my relationships, right? With my partner, with my kid, with family, with friends. I was constantly checked out. Um, I mean, I kind of had a sense, but I think probably other people felt it and experienced it more. I was like a zombie just going through the motions of life. I was dead inside, an empty shell of a person. There was just no life in me. And if anything got too much at any given moment, all that I wasn't letting myself feel, it just came out in a big explosion. It was in a fit of anger or sense of hopelessness, or once again, my old friend, these suicidal thoughts. I was not a pleasant person to be around. This is kind of how depression works, right? Like when you're in a major depressive episode, like you just drag everyone else down with you. And it's not that I was always a downer, um, and that people didn't want to be around me because I was no fun. Depression for me, and I imagine it probably is for a lot of other people, it just comes out in a lot of different ways, right? I mean, if I was wanting to feel better, but I can't, and other people around me didn't necessarily help with that, right? Like if nothing they were doing helped to make me feel better, I would snap at them, right? I mean, it's unfair to them. Like it's not their responsibility for how I feel, but because I feel overwhelmed and I just want somebody else to take off that burden, I'm just I'm just snapping at them. Um Sometimes it was because I was dismissive of help and genuine care and concern from people, right? Like people might express care, but I would just kind of brush it off. Um, Partly because maybe I was feeling hopeless myself at the time, but other times it was because like I just didn't want to drag other people down with me. I just felt like if I shared what it is I was really going through, how I was feeling, I would just drag the world down with me. So a lot of times, at least early on, I tried to just keep it to myself. Um, Pretending like I was okay was pretty common um, as a result. Eventually, the people that care about you, they start to actually give up or to just move away themselves, right? Because the truth is, like my behaviors, my words encourage them to do so. It's not intentional. It's just how I am when I'm depressed. Like the way that I am just makes it hard on the people around you. And though they try, if I don't eventually get to a place where I'm responding to them differently, like they lose energy, they lose motivation to keep trying. So even the people who probably cared, I'm sure at some point just felt exhausted. And, I told you I started going to therapy, so you think I would have learned my lesson. And maybe I did, at least to some degree. Though, in terms of the way that I responded, it just there's a lot of like one step forward, two steps back. Like that's what it often felt like. But the one thing I did learn was that that I was wanting to find a therapist. Again, I needed some encouragement because, um, when you're depressed, like you're just not feeling very particularly motivated to seek help. Like it's like a weird self-fulfilling sort of cycle, right? Where you're depressed, so as a result, you just aren't motivated to find help, but as a result of not finding help, you stay depressed, right? So I found a therapist. The first therapist I found that I saw for a decent amount of time was helpful to some degree, but not really with feelings. It was really with the more intellectual side of things, kind of getting me to consider what's going on from a bird's eye view. But also, it was like having a colleague where we're trying to diagnose me and to figure out what it is that I might be experiencing. So there's a lot of like random things that he would suggest checking out. as a possibility beyond just simple depression and anxiety. Uh, the one I'm seeing now, though, I think is a much better fit, a better balance of what I really needed, which is, yeah, the intellectual side of things, like having somebody who understands me in that respect, I think helps. But at the end of the day, what I needed to do was deal with the feelings that I just wasn't able to let out, at least not in a healthy way. Uh, but I honestly didn't start seeing improvements, at least for that depressive episode, until I started also coupling it with some medication. So for the first time, I was taking antidepressants. I was never opposed, to medication. I was familiar with it, and so I was always open to it as a possibility. And it wasn't for me like a sign of like shame or anything. Like it wasn't something to like be like, oh no, like I'm on medication. It was actually for me. It was had more to do with my own weird obsession with not losing control. I have this thing about being in control, especially of my own mind. Like I have a fear of losing control of my own mind. Right, it scares the living shit out of me. But even with all this, like it's been a struggle. I mean, we're going on years now, not days or weeks or months. It's years, uh, almost a decade. um, Trying to get back on my feet, man. And during these depressive episodes, my health took a beating. Like I did not sleep well. I did not exercise regularly. I just didn't care. And so like my body just, man, they just started deteriorating. So even now I'm feeling the impacts because I'm trying to finally regain better physical health, and that makes a difference. Like at least all the research shows, right? Improving your physical self helps your emotional self. Um, I am more aware of, but still can't stop intrusive thoughts of self harm. I still get them for various different reasons. Uh, I don't know how to explain it. Maybe some philosopher can help me with it, but I go through these cycles of existential crises where I have just this overwhelming sense that life is completely meaningless and that I should just end it all. It's not necessarily because I'm depressed, but life just feels meaningless. Mm. And everything that I have done to distract myself feels like a show that I'm putting on or something, and it's not real. All of it is fake. But right, life really just has no meaning at all. Um, I think in earlier sessions, those were some dark discussions I had with my therapist. And now they become more like, oh, we're back to this again, right? Like it's with a little bit more humor in these sessions now. Um, Life has become more stable from my daughter's health to work to living situation. I mean, all that stuff helps, of course, but it's hard not to think, given my history, I know that I don't know when the next depressive episode's going to be. I don't know exactly what's going to trigger it. And I know that things could turn real fast, especially when life just constantly seems to be throwing curveballs at you. You can't control what you can't control, and you can't control what life is going to bring, put on your table at any given moment. I don't know what you were hoping for in this story. I don't know what I was hoping for in this story, to be honest. Maybe we're just hoping for a happy ending, but this is not a story of some triumph over depression and anxiety. It's far from it. The real truth is that there are good days, there are bad days. Um, I've built up a better support system for myself. Um, I have things I could turn to now, and better habits that I've developed that I know that I'll be in better position to deal with things in a healthier way than I had before. But the best that I could honestly hope for in any given day is just enjoy the good days and manage the bad. But knowing my history, I know that bad days can spiral into something very dark very fast. And for me, tomorrow just is never guaranteed. Never. So, how am I doing? I guess today I'm doing okay so far. But ask me again tomorrow.